Live from the Al Gore Memorial Information Superhighway, it's the Plutopia News Network live stream. Our guest this time, Chris Boyd, a frequent guest on the Plutopia podcast and senior network analyst. If Chris doesn't know the answer to your questions about how networking works, he's just the guy who will go out and find the answer. Your hosts, as always, are John Lebkowsky, the Plutopia CEO, and Scoop Sweeney, that's me, the Plutopia Chief Operating Officer. Now live from the garden spot of Central Texas, South Austin, here's John L.
Hey, hi everybody. Really happy to be here and happy to have Chris on board. We know that most of you are sheltering in place somewhere if you're behaving properly. Chris is not sheltered in place, but is sheltered at work, right?
Yeah, there's 3 people on the entire floor, so kind of easy to maintain your social distance.
So Chris is an essential person at the UT system, and Chris and I have known each other for probably at least 50 years, and actually, Scoop and I have actually known each other longer than that.
Since 3rd grade for me, and I think you were in 1st grade.
You're right.
At Scenic Park Hill Elementary.
But Chris and I are both members of the board of directors of EFF Austin, which is the only chapter of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And we have worked over the years on issues of network policy and activism. But Chris is also an expert in network, what would you say, system?
Network, BGP routing. Basically, I know how to make the internet go.
Right. And I suppose there are now challenges in making the internet go now that everybody's at home trying to log on at once.
It's probably pretty interesting if you're a last mile ISP, because what I'm hearing is that all of the cable companies and fiber providers and DSL companies that provide home access, residential access, what they're basically seeing is their 95th percent peak that they designed their network for typically hits them in the evening when everybody comes home and starts streaming Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, whatever have you, is now starting sometime around 10 a.m. and running until 10, 11 p.m. So the peak is still there. It's the same level of peak. It just lasts a lot longer.
Yeah. What are the challenges presented by sustaining that peak over a longer period of time?
Actually, not much, as long as your network was engineered and implemented so that you can carry that peak. It's no more stress on the equipment to have that peak last longer. It's just an interesting side effect of everybody working from home.
Are you seeing any throttling going on? I know Netflix was throttling some of their European customers, and I would kind of expect that to crop up over here.
I don't really see any reason for it. I don't think that they actually did anything in Europe. I know that some of the EU countries were considering requesting Netflix to slow down and not deliver any 4K streams and maybe scale back 1080, from 1080p to 720p. But I don't think that they ever actually went through with it. I can't really see any reason for it, because if you're not hitting your peak, you're not hitting your wall of 100% utilization. Packets are packets, man. Let them go.
There was an article in the New York Times on March 18th that says, "So we're working from home. Can the internet handle it?" And pretty much what I think you're saying is that the internet should be able to handle it if it's properly engineered.
I'd say that the internet is handling it. And so that's not should, it is handling it. I've seen a few reports over the past couple of days. A few ISPs are having some high utilization on some peering links between a couple of different ISPs, but they can get those worked out. They can shift their traffic around if they need to. But pretty much it's just been business as usual from everybody that I've heard of.
I guess if you're working at a place where you have pretty high-end connectivity, and then you're forced to work at home, and your kid is in the next room playing, Fortnite, and your wife is downstairs or in the next room streaming a movie on Netflix,
Right.
and you have some limited amount of bandwidth, you're going to notice that, right?
Yeah. So if you're on an older cable modem or an old school DSL line, yeah, you're going to hit that wall, but that's going to be local to your house. And so it's going to be, it's going to affect your individual performance, not the network performance overall.
Is there an ideal setup that you would recommend people go to when they're in that sort of situation or something similar, just to make life, easy for the entire household?
Stop playing games and do your work. I don't know. Kids are going to be kids, and they're going to watch what they want to watch and play their games. So that's a local network administrator problem. So they'll have to work out the allocation of resources inside the house.
Sounds like a job for Superman.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in that position.
I'm just looking at this article over here. It's saying that major carriers like Verizon and Charter and Cox, AT&T, guys like that are all saying that they're pretty sure they can handle the load, handle the demand.
Right.
And Comcast has lifted data caps. Maybe others have done that too.
Yeah, AT&T has as well.
There was something from Verizon the other day. They've done, I don't know if they lifted data caps, but they've made some kind of concession. I don't recall what it was.
I can't remember what it was either. Data caps, in my opinion, are kind of just silly. So I don't understand why they put them in place in the first place.
So here's a guy quoted in this article named John Peha, P-E-H-A. He's a professor of electrical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. And he's saying lives depend on reducing face-to-face interaction, and the internet is perfect for that. But there's a risk that usage will surge and capacity will be inadequate and performance will suffer. This is new ground for all of us.
Possibly, maybe, but I'm not seeing any reports of it yet. The last ISP contract job that I had, they were upgrading their backbone network to multiple 100 gigabits per second, and they're a top 10 cable ISP, and so if they're at that level, then I'm sure that Comcast and Spectrum, Charter, all the rest of them are well beyond that.
Well, Christy, you work at UT and advise people on how to operate remotely. What kind of guidance are you giving them that you can tell us about that might be good advice for other people who are just now realizing they have to work from home and they're inexperienced? Yeah,
so we've actually had a constant series of webinars. UT system went work from home, I think a week ago, 2 weeks ago, this coming Friday. So basically we've gone through and told people, okay, this is Zoom. This is how you use Zoom. Basic just tutorials on how to use Zoom, how to use Skype for Business. This is a VPN. Here's how you start a VPN. So lots of that kind of stuff. My small contribution to that was I went and did some studies with the Microsoft Network Quality Analysis tool, and was quite surprised to find that even my wireless network at home is nowhere near as good quality as a wired network connection. So if you are using any kind of VoIP application, if you are using any kind of video conference application, then if at all possible, use a wired network connection versus a wireless connection. You will find a marked improvement in video quality. Now that said, I'm coming to you live over a wireless network connection because this is my laptop on our public access network, but it's very high quality enterprise gear. So, and I'm sitting literally 8 feet from the access point, so shouldn't have any issues.
Yeah,
But,
I have one part of my house is quite large, and one part of it's connected using a power line adapter, which is fairly low speed, but it was okay until just the past couple of weeks, and now it's become, fairly low speed, and I would imagine that's a result of just it's not quite getting what it was expecting.
yeah. I'm not sure how fast the power line adapters go. I know there've been a couple of different generations of that technology, but the early ones were, I think, only 10 megabits a second or so.
Yeah, this one I think runs about 50, but they have newer ones that are much higher, and I've been
Right.
too lazy to go out and order one.
Yeah, so my next networking project is at my house is probably going to be find a way to pull fiber from the place where the Google Fiber box sits up to my second floor where I've got all my stuff. So right now it's running over a copper cable, and I'd like to get that turned into fiber. So
A minute ago, I shared a screen with the internet traffic report, but that appears to be no longer effective.
Yeah, I saw that they were dated from November when I checked yesterday. That used to be
November
one
of
my
2018.
Yeah. I think they've left the building along with all this.
Yeah, it's been a while since I saw somebody. There used to be one, I think, called the Internet Weather Report. That you might want to look for that one.
Okay, I'm looking now.
Yeah, I go to Down Detector, which gives me some information if I'm having a particular problem with a particular service. They're fairly good at showing what the state of the nation is.
Yeah.
Let's see. I did find the internet weather map. It looks like
we're looking at
so it
Slack.
shows. Oh, really?
Never mind. That's my fingers moving.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So this shows there's a list of locales, and it shows latency for those locales, and some of those are slightly low and others are not. None of them are in the red.
Yeah.
How do we read this map?
That I couldn't tell you. That's a kind of a strange map.
It is an odd one, isn't it?
Yeah.
But generally it shows here that the internet weather is good.
Yeah.
I would expect that to go down a little bit as the day progresses, because I was looking at some of Zoom's metrics, and they were showing a huge spike beginning about 10:30 or 11, and it continues into the afternoon. It gets better, so basically they're less hammered in the early morning and evening hours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, as more and more people show up to watch our live stream, that's definitely going to have an impact on the health of the internet.
Yes, I'm sure the crowd, he rushed forward.
Yeah.
It's up to 2 people now. One of them is me and one of them is you, Scoop.
Hey.
This is incest on a internet scale.
So do you have advice for people, Chris, who are sheltered in place and having to use their local internet? Are there things that they could be doing to improve their bandwidth or to troubleshoot any problems they may be having, that sort of thing?
I can't really think of anything other than, if you are having any type of voice quality issues or video conference quality issues, try getting a wired connection. That'll probably clear it up. Hopefully there won't be, there's been quite a bit of discussion about game developers suddenly dumping 40, 50, 60, 80 gigabyte updates onto Akamai, and then Akamai pegging a bunch of peering links to the various ISPs lately. Hopefully the game developers will be a little bit more conscientious about that and maybe not release that latest game, but that's not really anything that an end user can control. When the game updates, the game updates. So,
traditionally in tech support for computers and also for routers, the first advice is often to reboot the thing.
Right.
And I know that does fix problems with routers. What exactly does that do when you reboot your router?
Okay, so first of all, I have a little bit of a problem with calling your home firewall box or your home NAT box a router. It does route a little bit, basic, a little bit maybe, but what rebooting the router does, rebooting your home NAT box does, is it clears out the state table, because every connection that your machine makes, your phone makes, every connection out to the internet, that box has to maintain a state table that says, okay, this internal IP address and port number is talking to this external IP address and port number. And so there's a limited amount of memory in those boxes. And so, your phone's got, it's checking your email, it's checking for software updates, it's doing all these things, all the applications on your phone that are, tracking you and doing all that stuff, they're all talking to the servers out on the internet. Your laptop, your desktop is out there talking to things on the internet, downloading web pages, doing video conferences, all these types of things. So there can be tens of thousands of those connections in your NAT box's memory. And if it runs out of memory, weird things start happening. So sessions get reset. Basically connections get broken. And what rebooting that device does is it clears all that stuff out and it says, okay, I'm going to start all over. And so you reset all those connections, and they have to be reinitiated by all the devices on the inside of your network. And so that's why that fixes things. Basically, it just clears out the cruft in the memory of that device.
Is there a best practice time, period of time for you to do that? I mean, should daily, weekly, monthly? If everything's working fine, just let it do its thing, because it will eventually time out those connections. So, the box will sit there and your phone will say, okay, I'm done checking. Basically, it sends a message to the server on the other side, say it's checking for updates. It says, okay, I'm done checking for updates. And that's a specific TCP message type. And when your home NAT box sees that message type, it'll say, okay, this conversation is over, and it'll delete that state table for that connection. And so it will clear these things out itself. But every once in a while, software is software, can be buggy. And so every once in a while, you just have to go in there and reboot the thing and clear the state table out. That's usually the first thing if I have any kind of connectivity problems to my good friends at Speculum Cable. That's a term my wife uses because she just loves them to death. and they're somewhat invasive. I guess it does fit. But first thing they do is, of course, is to instruct you to reboot your setup, and it doesn't matter what your problem is. They're going to tell you to do that anyway. The problem may be that their truck ran over your dog, but
Yeah. Well,
you still have to reboot your modem.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing is that, cable modems used to be just bridges. So they would take whatever Ethernet frame came from you and flip it over and throw it out onto the HFC hybrid fiber coax plant to go up to the CMTS, the cable modem termination system, to actually get out to the internet. But nowadays, cable modems are also a lot smarter, and that's, I guess, a good thing in some cases, because a lot of them actually run firewalls inside the cable modem as well. And so they'll inspect for nasty packets and try to help you have a better security posture in the background. And so they also have state tables, and they also keep track of all the connections, and they also keep track of all of these other things that are going on with packets flying back and forth between you and the internet. And so they can also run out of memory and hit a bug and need to be rebooted. So that's why they tell you that, because restarting the cable modem basically says, okay, we're going to start from ground zero. We're going to relearn all the MAC addresses on your side of the network. And then if you reboot your NAT box, then you're basically back at square one, and everything usually will start working again.
And a hush fell over the room.
That's right.
I'm sorry. I was just looking to see if anybody had posted any questions for us, and they have not. The other thing I know to do if you have bandwidth issues over your Wi-Fi connection is connect to your device, your modem or router or whatever we want to call it, NAT box, via Ethernet, direct Ethernet connection.
Yep.
So that is inherently going to be more bandwidth, right?
Not necessarily more bandwidth, but it will be more reliable connection. There's no interference. There's nothing else there that will interfere with the signal going across that wire. If you're out on the on 2.4 or 5 gigahertz wireless, you've got your Sonos speakers, you've got your Bluetooth, your microwave oven, and all these other things out there in the world sharing the spectrum. And usually it works, but there can be interference. So for a while I was having terrible performance on my home wireless network because Spectrum had put up one of their public access points basically in my backyard, and it kept stepping on my home wireless. And so I had to go and figure out what frequency they were on and change all the channels I was operating on so that we wouldn't step on each other. And so that interference over a wireless network is going to happen. So that's why I always say, if in doubt, plug it in and your problem should get better.
So basically you're saying you changed the channels that were active?
Yeah.
How do you, like, if you're a person who is not like you, very well informed and educated about the internet and the various devices that connect to the internet, how would you troubleshoot that?
That's a good question.
I've encountered that, and it's basically just trying to see what works, because I tried a bunch of channels before I got my neighborhood settled down.
Yeah. I guess the best recommendation I can make is, if you have a home Wi-Fi box, most of them these days seem to have a find an open channel or assign the channel automatically type of setting. And so the box will sit there and it will listen for other traffic and then basically pick a channel that is open and use it. The other thing is, if you can, use 5 gigahertz devices instead of 2.4. So
What's talk about the difference between the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz.
Okay, so on 2.4, there's not a lot of literal bandwidth. There aren't that many different frequencies that you can use to send data over. They're basically just 3 channels that don't overlap very much. And so you got, I think it's what, 1, 7, and 12 in the US on 2.4 gigahertz basically don't overlap that much. On 5 gigahertz, you've got much more spectrum, much more literal frequencies that you can use. And so it's much easier on 5 gigahertz to find a channel that's open so that you can put your stuff on there and not interfere with your neighbors. Also, 5 gigahertz doesn't seem to propagate through other people's, through walls and stuff like that quite as well as 2.4 does. And so there's less interference opportunity.
Yeah, the problem
I'm
I've
actually
encountered
surprised.
with that is, in a large house with big thick walls, the 5 gig was okay on one side of the house, but when you get further away, then it's just not very reliable. So I have to go down to the other choice. And is there any device or method that you can use to expand the reach of these wireless connections?
Yeah, you can go out and you can get enterprise class gear, which costs quite a bit more. And they'll have what they call MIMO, multi-input, multi-output antennas, arrays actually built into the thing. And so they can actually kind of steer the beam to your device rather than just sending it out in a big donut. So most of the access points have a propagation pattern that's kind of like basically a big donut, and they sit in the middle of it. If your device does have external antennas, sometimes you can rotate the antenna 90 degrees, and that'll give you basically a different shaped donut, which may help you.
I've gone through a couple of those Wi-Fi extenders, those hardware extenders that you can get that you're supposed to just plug in, and supposedly they'll pick up the signal and extend it further throughout your domain. But I couldn't get either one of them to work very well.
Yeah, those things, I've not really played with them because my approach is just drag another cable out there and put another access point on it. So I actually have an access point downstairs and an access point upstairs. And so that way I don't have to worry about getting propagation through the insulation between the floors. So, which is also in my house, they for some reason, they put metallized insulation between the floor joists. So
yeah, actually in my house, I'm upstairs from my access point, and right now I'm in my office upstairs with the door closed, and I'm having surprisingly good results despite that.
Yeah,
at 5 gigahertz.
Yeah.
So I guess it sort of depends on how your house is built, right?
It does. It does. There was one early on in the days of wireless networking. There was one guy when I was running an IT services company. He said, "I've got terrible performance in my house. I can't figure it out." And so we're like, "Okay, well, we'll go out there and we'll take a look." Turns out that his house was built with limestone veneer, and the limestone was rust colored. So it had a lot of iron in it. And you could set up an access point in his living room, and walk a foot either side of a window and the signal would be gone. You stand in front of the window outside the house, you get great performance. So there's a lot of building materials can interfere with wireless network performance as well.
Kind of a Faraday cage thing.
Yeah. So
Great silence again.
yeah. But that's why I always say, if in doubt, plug it in.
Yeah, the whole shelter in place isolation that's going on. I noticed an interesting thing. I had an epiphany. It was either an epiphany or an episiotomy. No, it was definitely an epiphany that all of a sudden there are no toilet paper ads on television, and replacing the toilet paper ads are lots of ones for anything that could be vaguely misconstrued as being an antibacterial, antivirus agent, Lysol and Clorox and God knows what.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that seems to be the new abnormal that we're living and working under.
Yeah.
I don't think they have to advertise toilet paper anymore.
No, I think that was a no-brainer there. It's
yeah.
We don't have any in the stores. Why should we tell people to go out and buy?
Right. They're probably looking at a 6-month production backlog at this point.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But the thing I find interesting is you cannot find high-proof vodka in any of the liquor stores anymore.
Oh, I know. People were using Tito's handmade vodka from Austin as hand sanitizer, which I thought was just a bad idea. I like Tito's vodka.
Yeah, that's a lot better for gargling than hand sanitizer.
Yeah, I would rather just use some soap and water and save save the Tito's and the whatever your drink of choice is to sanitize your internals, not your externals.
Yeah, so I was also anything that's standard proof, aka 80 proof or 40% ethanol, according to CDC's site, is not going to be very effective anyway. You got to have at least 60% ethanol for it to work. So you're looking at Bacardi 151 or Everclear, or I managed to get hold of some 190 proof vodka, which came in handy when I had to go to Costco the other day. Came in, wiped all the outside of the packages down with that.
Well, it's interesting that Tito's is going into the production of hand sanitizer. That sort of lit a fire in their heads, and they're going to give it away for free. So it's really mostly a marketing thing.
Yeah.
A lot of these distilleries are doing that. They use what they call the head, which is the first part of the batch when they're processing it. So it's not usually very tasty. So they would not use it, or they would give it to their really cheap off-brand usages. But the number of distilleries starting that is just spreading like wildfire. They suddenly have a way to keep the doors open.
Yeah, I saw Desert Door is also doing the same thing. They use the heads and the tails to make some for hand sanitizer for APD.
I've got another network-related question. So for a number of years now, people in places like Austin, where Google Fiber was coming in, would say, "Oh man, I can't wait till Google Fiber reaches my neighborhood." Really excited about Google Fiber, and I'm just sort of wondering. So you mentioned earlier that you're on Spectrum. I assume that you have access to Google Fiber in your neighborhood, correct?
Yeah, I'm on Google.
Oh, you are on Google. Okay,
I'm on Google. Yeah.
So is it really that radically different than some of its competitors?
I think so. The Google seems to be managing the network with less oversubscription. So when I go and I connect to a very fast server and start downloading stuff, I can actually download at multiple hundreds of megabits a second. You can, so they don't seem to be very highly oversubscribed.
Yeah, I had the unfortunate positioning in my neighborhood of being at the end of the run, which meant by the time the connection got to me, there was very little left in the bucket. And Spectrum came out and redid their routing so that I'm just, getting a much better feed. So I could get a, 200 megabit signal just routinely, and it used to be a lot less than that.
Yeah. The Spectrum has also been very aggressively rolling out new technology called DOCSIS 3.1, and 3.1 is a lot better at spectrum management, and so they can deliver up to 940 megabits a second to your house with DOCSIS 3.1.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what in the world would you do with that connection in your home?
I find uses for it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you would.
Well, that would probably be about sufficient for my grandson's gaming activities.
Yeah.
So I have one other question, Chris, and this
Sure.
has nothing to do with networking. Since you had to drive into work today, and Austin is, as of midnight last night, supposedly under lockdown, was the traffic any different?
Traffic was non-existent. I mean, that was, I've had to come in and go in and do network maintenance work and things like that at 3 or 4 in the morning, and it was even less traffic than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it worked. People are staying home.
People are staying home.
Wow. Well, that's great to hear.
Yep.
I think I assume yesterday it was pretty much normal, and today it was the first day that you had that saw that lack of traffic.
Last week when I came in, it was pretty light traffic. I'd say it's probably a tenth of what it was even then. And there were, so last Wednesday when I came in, there were, say, 3 or 4 cars deep at the light at Cesar Chavez and First Street Bridge heading north into downtown. Today, I was the only car. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that is good to hear. I'm glad to hear that people are sheltering in place.
Yep.
And hopefully we won't have to wait 18 months to hit the streets again, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Chris, thanks for joining us this morning. This has been really great.
You're
I feel
welcome.
a lot smarter than I did before we started talking.
Good.
Well,
Glad
I
I could help.
enjoyed it, and I'm sure we'll find another excuse to take up some of your time in the future.
Sure. Happy to help.
Okay, man. Thank you.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Are we signing off, Scoop?
Yeah, something like that.
I love that.
You can stay in touch with Plutopia at plutopia.io. On Facebook, look for @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lebkowsky, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.
Off we go.
All right.
Bye.